legends. It's That Aussie Metal Guy here with Crannk.com. Tonight, wherever you are in the world, it's a great pleasure that I'm joined by Tom Templar, vocalist, artist, storyteller with London's Lords of the Rift, Green Lung, who are preparing to unleash their fourth album, Necropolitan, on September 11th through Nuclear Blast Records. It's a love letter to Gothic London, cemeteries, occult history, and heavy metal heritage, all delivered through those massive Green Lung riffs and incredible storytelling that only Tom knows how to weave. Tom, thank you so much for joining me, mate.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute bloody pleasure, man. Before we get into the album, I always like to go back to the earliest core musical memory. What was that first song, album, or memory or moment that made music more than background noise for you?
Whoa, it's a good question. You know what? I think when I was at school, a guy gave me a CDR of Toxicity by System of a Down, way back when. And I think that's probably when music went through. I mean, there's lots of early memories. Like I remember my parents, we'd be driving to the coast for our holiday in the summer, and I remember us buying a tape of 60s, just 60s hits,
Yep.
but they were Leader of the Pack by Shangri-Las, and the kind of melodramatic teenage death stuff. And I remember being obsessed with that tape, and the Beach Boys and that sort of stuff. But System of a Down, Toxicity, I think that was when metal in particular was I was like, oh, this is really so different to anything I've heard before, and was just totally intrigued by it. So I think that was probably the gateway drug when I was about 10. My first show ever was Judas Priest, though, so I quickly graduated when I was 14, 15. It was Priest on the Angel Retribution tour. So I graduated from the new metal to the good stuff pretty quick. Although I still love System of a Down.
Yeah, music with stories as
um,
well. That's one thing I love about your music as well.
for sure, and that tape, the '60s tape, all of those songs were very much storytelling, really. The kind of teenage melodramatic murder ballad kind of death disc era of the '60s. They're all these little stories, and I guess you're totally right. I hadn't even thought about that. Um, that was a big part of it. But also, I was a really bookish kid. I was a kid who would go out and collect weird mushrooms and bones and bring them back into the house and try and make my own museum. I was a kid who made horror movies on a camcorder with his brother. A total like nerd. So always was thinking about I guess music and story were two big the confluence for me, and didn't really work that out. At first I wanted to be a writer, and then I didn't see myself as a musician until quite late. And I think actually the truth is that I'm somewhere in the middle of both. I'm not really a writer and I'm not really a musician. I'm in this kind of weird midpoint, and I think a lot of singers in metal bands probably are that. I was just listening to a podcast with after we saw Lamb of God at Bloodstock, and Randy was, he's obviously written books, and I think his perception of himself as an artist sort of chimed with me. I was like, yeah, I don't see myself as a singer, but I also don't see myself fully as a writer. I feel like there's a nice kind of in between place there that I occupy, and I really enjoy that now. It takes a while to work out what you're doing and whether you're doing it right.
Yeah, I totally get that because I was the same. I was a real bookish, nerdy kid, and I'd write little horror stories. I'd write, and I remember grade 5, I'd be writing these stories, and one of mum's friends would sit there and type it up with a typewriter and everything else as well. And this kind of grew into an extension of me wanting to write and my love of music. So here I am writing and doing all of this as well. You've described Necropolitan as a love letter to Gothic London and riffs. Tell me about that idea of building an entire album around these cemeteries as well, the occult history and heavy music heritage beginning to take shape.
Well, I mean, for this album, we were looking back a little bit. We all grew up in the countryside, really rural. In I was in Norfolk, Scott was in Devon, and we were all that kid who loved heavy music but didn't really have the kind of mates. I remember being Tomb King. My teenage doom band was me and my friend Dave, aka Morbidus, who we we recruited a drummer who was more into like the Eagles and Alanis Morissette, and we were trying to make him play like Electric Wizard style. It's just like, you're always like two members short of your picnic when you're growing up in the country because fuck all is going on. But then getting to London, we all met each other, and the London scene was really important for us. Like big shout out to the Black Heart pub, to the Bird's Nest pub in Deptford. The record shops are amazing. Rise Above Records, Crips the Wizard, Raven Records. Um, there's a ton, and we felt like I'm saying this looking back, like when we were writing the album, I wasn't really thinking like this is a love letter to London.
No,
But when I
no.
look back, I can tell why I did this now because next year we'll be 10 years old as a band, and I think it's sort of this sort of looking back before you go forward into the next thing, the next decade of the band, I guess. And it's kind of that's definitely part of it. But also it goes all the way back to when I was a kid. I think when I was at university, I like was trying to write a novel about it's sort of a cult novel, kind of influenced by Peter Ackwood's book Hawksmoor and From Hell by Alan Moore.
Yeah.
That featured the seven cemeteries. That's where I got the Necropolis Railway, and I was like, that stuff is now in a desk somewhere. I haven't even looked at it for a decade because it would make me depressed. but actually, a lot of the research and stuff. That's the funny thing about having creative projects. You can think you've failed because you've spent 6 months working on a book or whatever that didn't quite work out, but then all of that research doesn't go anywhere.
No.
All the thinking doesn't go anywhere, and definitely with Graveyard Sun, you mentioned Black Harvest. Graveyard Sun was definitely something that was like me wanting to scratch that itch early on, but then after Heathen Land, the sort of storytelling aspect of the band had been welcomed so much by the fans that I felt a lot more like confident and at ease with really pushing those elements. So it was like, oh, it's time for let's really just go for the whole Necropolitan kind of theme. And I just felt like it's also a nice new landscape to explore because we have spent for me, like Woodland Rites is sort of the spring album, Black Harvest is the autumn album. This Heathen Land is kind of the British countryside as a whole, and then Necropolitan's kind of London, this sort of capital city, and we're sort of, you just sort of, you only realize these things when you look back. But yeah, it felt like the right time to tackle it, and also I didn't feel like I could write about London authentically until I'd lived here over a decade because I didn't want to be a tourist. And London's so often done badly by metal. It's like, yeah, Jack the Ripper. Yeah. It's always sort of the same shit. And London's much weirder and more interesting than that if you have a bit of a dig. And so, yeah, that was part of it as well. I was like, as a Londoner, I'm offended by the terrible cliched takes on London. Apart from Accept and London Leather Boys tune.
Yeah, that's no worries. And I did mention the Magnificent Seven cemeteries. It's kind of created as these monuments to status and permanence, but nature's eventually reclaimed them. I didn't know any of this till I was doing my research for the album, and it kind of feels like the perfect green lung image, human ambition being swallowed by moss, ivy, and wilderness, and in turn, feeding the rest of us to breathe, the lungs kind of almost, as you mentioned there, yeah.
Totally, and I think there's something. I think that is at the core of a lot of what I've been writing about is like in the sort of climate crisis, late capitalist kind of like mad fucking world we live in. For me, like doom always has to be about an issue of doom, and I'm not saying we're a doom band. I think we're a hard rock band that has a doomy aspect, but that's kind of what Sabbath was, and Sabbath, they were writing about Vietnam with War Pigs. I think our big theme has been the sense of like environmental degradation, and also the fact that our society seems to be geared around trying to transcend being human and trying to transcend planet Earth rather than live with it. Be comfortable with death, be comfortable with being part of an ecosystem, and that was definitely a big thing. It seems more and more pressing every year that goes on. I'm like, Um, it also feels very like metal bands have always railed against Christianity, but for me, the tech industry right now is like
Oh,
that, that kind of thinking of like we will that there's a better world in the next world. We can trash this one and use it to fuel our our crazy ambitions. And this has been proved throughout humanity to be a very bad idea. But it's amazing how successive generations don't like just look at history and go, "Fuck,
yeah.
the same thing happens every fucking time." It just blows my mind.
Oh,
But
it's,
hanging over it for sure.
oh, it certainly does. And you kind of recorded at Rockfield Studios with Tom, tracking the drums, bass, rhythm guitars. What did playing together in the room bring out in the band that you hadn't quite captured on some of the previous records, or is this the way you are always doing it? I couldn't remember
No,
from the
it's not the
last
way we
one.
would have done it. It's the way
Yep.
we would have loved to have done it, but we just didn't have the time or budget really.
Yep.
Or skill maybe. Like we were a lot more drilled as a live band than we'd ever been because people kind of forget that like the first few years of the band we were pandemic mode, so we weren't doing fuck all.
Yeah.
And so just being out on the road with Unto Others for 5 weeks, being out on the road with Clutch, being out on the road with Opeth, blah blah blah. It's like we just had a lot more road miles, and I think ultimately, I wish we'd done the other three albums like this one because I think it makes for a much more real, tight, like true impression of what the band actually sounds like.
Yep.
I think I love the previous records, but I can see all of the joins, and I
Yeah.
can. It, for, the funny thing about Necropolitan is it's so like just what was done in the room, in a way that the others weren't. The others were much more pieced together, and you know, it, it's like when you think about the fact that Black Sabbath, that's recorded in 8 hours, I think. There's something incredibly powerful about doing that, and it's really tempting to just go into a studio and look at all the gadgets and go, oh, we can do anything. But actually, you want some limitations. You want like the reason those early hard rock and metal albums are so classic sounding and have endured, I think, is because they are true captures of what the band sounded like, and they don't have any fat on them. They don't have like three bonus songs that the label wanted. If you notice back, Greenlung has always been 40 minutes, 20-minute aside, vinyl record in mind,
Yep.
that kind of band, and that's put us, I think, in a good stead because it's like you know you have to bring your A game, you have to bring your best songs, and you don't have room for that song that wasn't quite there.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah, so you kind of did mention, I just kind of come to me then, the interesting point you mentioned is coming out of COVID. I didn't even think of that. Coming out of that time was a hell of a time. And, with this Heathen Land, that hit number one over there in the UK charts. Did you foresee this kind of happening in these 4 years? And like for me, Black Harvest, you guys were like the band that people needed to know. And then with this Heathen Land, it kind of felt like you started hitting the right points, getting to the right ears, and starting playing a hell of a lot more shows as well.
definitely, man. Like it's funny with Black Harvest. Yeah, recorded in lockdown. Um, one very cold December, I guess, 2020. Um, it's it's kind of funny, like looking back, how little we'd actually played
Yeah.
anywhere that was a 150 cap, 200 cap small room. We only played our first festival after Black Harvest, which was Bloodstock. Um, so Heathen Land era was very much like, oh, we're a proper functioning, like touring band now. We're not just this sort of studio project that happens to have done a few gigs. Um, and it turns out we love that. Like it was kind of a bit of a head fuck because you kind of have to catch up. You're like, oh shit, we've been on ice. We need to learn how to do this shit live and do it every night. And like, I'm not saying they weren't growing pains, but it was a lot of fun. And I think bringing that energy to the album was, but also not overthinking it. Like I think Necropolitan is another Green Lung album. It's not like
Yeah.
a wholesale reinvention. It's almost like a doubling down on something. And I think you can be tempted. Like I'm really glad we did a more raw kind of back to basics album at this point. We kind of needed to because I think Heathen Land was amazing, but there's a sort of ladder there that takes you off into dangerous territory where it becomes too slick, basically,
Yep.
and you kind of forget that, like, a lot of people are like, oh, we're a better live band than we are on record, and I think that's interesting because um, it, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's like I want to be a better. I want it to feel bigger and better live. I think trying to capture that on record that's the most important thing. But I think you never know. We might want to just push it a bit further in the studio next time around. But I would say, like, as a rule, the bulk of a Green Lung album should be recorded like that now.
Yeah.
Like, let's just try and really like nail what the band sounds like when you're in a club with us, rather than getting too tempted by the kind of studio trickery. Um, you know, that doesn't stop the songwriting being more interesting and more progressive. But I'm just talking about the sonics, really, like keeping it fairly like live. And I was so chuffed. Like it also saves you a fuck ton of time because I wasn't thinking I'd do all my vocals at Rockfield, and I ended up doing everything at Rockfield, and we ended up doing it all in 9 days. And that's because we did rhythm guitars, bass, and drums all live. So, and I just think it sounds more real. It sounds more like a proper band. And some people won't notice that at all. But as someone who's in the process, it was great psychologically just to be able to be like, holy shit, we've got half a song tracked down in a few hours, and just feeling excited about like the energy in the room was great. Um, Whereas sometimes you're just sort of like staring into the abyss for 8 hours while someone tries to get a drum sound.
That's all part of capturing that energy, and you can really feel it in this album. And I love listening to albums like this. You mentioned the Hellmouth before. I loved how it kind of started with open the Hellmouth. Now that kind of makes a little more obvious kind of why you went with that track. But Evil in the House was our first doorway into this record, and I love the film clip and the description of it, like the stoner metal band conducting a paranormal investigation. Tell us about where that song began. And I did look into 50 Berkeley Square as well.
Yeah, yeah, good. So I think it's hard to remember. I remember that song going around on a demo when we were flying out to Greece, which must have been early 2024. So quite a while ago. I was the first, Even This House was the first song we had a demo for. And even then, I must have been thinking about the London theme because there's no way I would have randomly written a song about 50 Berkeley Square. And I'd watched this movie, The Legend of Hell House, which is amazing. It's like in the 70s, like a bunch of hammy actors going and being parapsychologists and investigating this sort of demented haunted house and getting absolutely cut to pieces in the process. But I think at that point I was sort of testing like, is this London theme going to work? And even this house, it felt like the classic sort of haunted house song. It felt like what is the most haunted house in London? Um, and I remember it came together. I remember writing a bit of it on the flight to Greece and sort of singing it at Scott when we were in the airport. So that must have been the first very early foray into the songwriting of the new album. But then I think it took a while, maybe 6 months more, before more demos started coming. That was sort of an early outlier. And then it ended up being a single, I think, just because we lived with it for a long time and also thought that the video would be fun. But yeah, I think that song also it's a very classic Green Lung song, but it's also got this sort of frosting of having a synth solo and some other slightly kookier elements. So it felt like a good one in terms of showing people like, don't worry, we haven't become a glam rock band or something, but also you're going to hear some elements that you might not have heard on other Green Lung songs. It's always weird with a single because we're an album band.
Yeah.
These albums are designed to be listened to as an album, so I fucking hate it personally. Like,
Yeah.
I'd much rather just go, here's an album, but sadly the music industry doesn't work like that.
Well, that's the good thing. Like, I've got my record player right here, but the vinyl, like old school listening, like you'd get the vinyl and you'd play the whole album. As you mentioned, Green Lung albums are meant to be played whole, in my opinion. Like most fucking albums
Yeah,
be played whole, you know what I mean? A lot of artists put a lot of time and effort into the stories, and especially with the Green Lung album, like you can take them at face value, listen to them rock out, but there's always so much more you can pick apart with your music as well, which I really fucking enjoy that aspect. So I mentioned I was big nerd stories. I love fucking history. I love learning new things and watching the same deal, man. I'd sit up late and you'd always catch those old fucking black and white horrors on ABC
yeah,
or whatever. So your music and your albums have always kind of connected with me. It's almost like a little mini movie in an album
yeah.
as well.
That's what I hope. Like, and some of that magic you don't. You, it only makes sense once it's all finished. Like Woodland Rights, I felt like much more of an organic journey than I was maybe even expecting. And then I think each album you see what really worked, and then you can use that more intentionally as you go, and you just build. And I'm really pleased that you feel like that kind of got that kind of movie. I see them all as like a collection of horror stories,
Yeah.
really connect, a thematic collection of horror stories, um, and some things which aren't horror stories, you know. So sometimes it's much more about just about nature or about the British landscape and a celebration of that. But I always want to like just make people imagine the world in their heads, and it's not going to be the same world that I've imagined there. But like, I think it appeals to people who have like, yeah, who are writers or creative people themselves. It's like a nice create. Like you need to be met halfway by your listener, right? Like if
Yeah.
someone doesn't really have an imagination, they're not going to enjoy a Green Lantern song.
That's it. A Necropolitan Line takes its inspiration from the real Necropolis Railway that transported London's dead out of Brookwood Cemetery as well. It's such a wonderfully macabre piece of British history. It's something you guys have done really well. Was it about that railway that made you think there was a Green Lung song waiting in there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, just the idea that the Victorians had transported the dead. They transported these coffins in first, second, and third class as well. So it was like that's the most British thing ever. Like even when you're dead,
With a cup of tea.
yeah, you've still got to be in the fucking yeah. You're not going to get any foot room. um, I just love that whole. I've always found the Necropolis Railway like an amazing thing, and it kind of was mad to me that no metal band like I know really had done a song based on it because it feels so metal.
Yeah.
Um, and we really wanted to do a kind of Highway Star type kind of instrumental workout with the keys and the guitars, and it just felt like you know if we were ever going to do a song about a vehicle, it's going to be about a coffin train. Um, and I also think like it was a nice way of joining up the cemeteries.
Yeah.
In my head, obviously, in real life, the Necropolis Railway went from like Waterloo out to Surrey, so it was a much more simple thing. But I love the idea that the cemeteries might be connected by like some underground passageways, and that there might be this sort of secret, sort of hellish version of the London Underground between them. Um, Still haven't confirmed that, and I've been poking around those cemeteries quite a lot. I'm not sure but the Mayor of London should definitely look into it.
Most definitely next album. Mate, look, I could talk all day about your stories and your music. The deep cuts are unreal. I implore people to get this whole album, chuck it out, chuck it on. Alistrel, Ozymandias, Together in the Dark, Dance to the Grave. I mentioned Hope in the Hellmouth. Put it in from the start, plat right to the bloody end. It's been an absolute bloody pleasure. It does drop September 11th through Nuclear Blast Records. Everybody grab it, crank it fucking loud. Want to get you down under. I know you've been asked by everybody. Hopefully get you down under one day, mate. It would be
A
fucking
lot.
amazing.
Our keyboardist has a lot of links to Australia. His wife's Australian, so like we are desperate to get down there. And I think it's never been more possible. I think the next this cycle might be we tried before, but it was just too early to make it work.
Yeah.
And I think we're not far off now. So fingers crossed, man. I'd love to come out to Australia and
Right.
New Zealand and blah blah blah. And I think it's gone from being like a that'll never happen to a hey that might happen. So fingers crossed.
Definitely
love
going to
to.
happen. Get you down to Ramsey Street or something as well, mate.
Yeah, you,
This has
well,
been an
thanks for the
absolute
support,
pleasure.
man. Yeah, thanks.
Last
Take
words,
care.
shout outs, thank yous are all on you, Tom.
Yeah, well, thanks to anyone listening in Australia. We hope to get out there soon, man. And big shout out to all of the great Australian bands: Radio Birdman, AC/DC, Rose Tattoo. I mean, I love Australian music. King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard, whatever. Like, I fuck with that shit. So hope to make it out there soon. And big love from everyone at Green Lung. Sorry, it's just me.